55, 56 people. So you've got to get a few more people here to break their record.
It's around 100 had registered. So I don't know how many
Yeah,
have
well,
actually showed up.
it's all about showing up. What can I tell you?
We'll get you that number.
So, so anyway, what we wanted to talk about tonight was sales and operations planning and master scheduling. People get the two of them confused all the time, and they call it SNOP, and they really do master scheduling. They call it master scheduling, but they're doing some SNOP, so it's all over the place. So what I want to go through tonight, and I usually have short presentations because I encourage lots of questions. As you have questions while I'm speaking, either politely interrupt me and ask your question, or just type it in the chat area here. And I believe Ken has volunteered. I don't know if he knew that, but Ken volunteered to handle anything that shows up in chat. So we're going to go through the triangle that guides our business, and I'll explain what that is. Then we'll take a quick look at what our business hierarchy is, how our business is run. You may not see this officially in your company or in black and white, but these are the processes that your company is going through in some way, shape, or form. I'll touch on very basically what is SNOP and what is the master production schedule. And we'll also take a little walk through a supermarket to get you to see the difference of where you master schedule based on the kind of products and services that you offer your customers, that they want you to offer. And then we'll compare how the two of them are the same. There are many things that are the same about them. And then we'll point out where and how they are different. So without any further ado, let's hit the triangle. Now, one thing you'll notice is that this is an equilateral triangle. All those angles are exactly the same. And that's a very important part of this concept, because these are the three major functions that are pulling against each other, that to make it work best for your company, they have to stay in balance. So we have the market, which include, that's where all our customers are. But if all our company did was do everything a customer wanted with no questions asked, you know, forget that our lead time is 10 weeks, the customer wants it in 2, and then we just go spend a lot of money to do it. If we only do what the customer wants, we will eventually be out of business. So one of the things we have to worry about is our investment, our major investments. And here I'm talking about the resources that it takes for our company to produce what our customers want, and what levels of inventory and at what level in the bill of material are we going to carry inventory. So that's pulling on it. Now, if we said, forget about the customer, let's just worry about our investment, there's another place where we're going to go out of business because the customers are going to go away. The third piece of this triangle is your supply chain. And whenever I talk about supply chain, I'm talking beginning to end. It starts way back with your suppliers, and very often their suppliers, and backwards comes through your plant, your manufacturing, your capabilities in your company, where you apply your magic, and then gets out to your customers. And then we get into distribution, logistics, etc. Well, we have to, first of all, be effective in our processes all throughout the supply chain. But then what this triangle is trying to tell us is we also have to be efficient. So let's do the right things, get that all set up, and then let's make them as efficient as possible. And that's where you see programs like Lean and what have you to make things work. So we're pulling on all these things at once, and we want to keep those angles the same. We don't want to draw it more towards one or the other necessarily. So when we talk about a business hierarchy, there's different levels of processes that we go through to make this all work. So the way you read this chart, when we go from top to bottom, at the top, we're looking furthest out into the future, the horizon. And as we go down, that horizon starts to shrink, getting closer and closer to today. When that happens, we go from having a very minimal amount of detail to a ton of detail. Think about your MRP and breaking down all your bills of material and every single part number, but you can handle that intense amount of detail at the operational level because you're only looking out a few weeks into the future. Now, the numbers on here are rules of thumb and not going to be the same for every single company, but it's the example that we use throughout just so we're all on the same page when we're talking. So if we start at the top, very strategically, companies are doing a process called business planning, and they're looking years into the future. Most likely they only do this once a year, unless you have a catastrophe like we're going through now, and you may have to do it a couple times. But in general, it's done once a year. Very little detail because you're looking so far out there. Now, what we'll do is we'll talk about things like, gee, where do we want our business to be in 5 years? What's going to keep us going? An option that may come up, we may start to look and say, you know, it would be really good for us to buy one of our competitors. You don't even necessarily know who or even think about trying to figure that out, but you know that's one of the ways that you can increase your business and get it going. When we do that and come up with these ideas, we have to validate that they make some kind of sense. And that's where the financing validation comes into play. So if we think we're going to buy another business, then we start to think about, and we do the test that says, how are we going to get that money? Are we going to just keep setting aside money from operations every day? Are we going to invest, do it in financial investments? Are we going to go to a bank and borrow the money? Or are we going to go to the bank and steal the money? You know, that there's all different options there. But we kind of figure out, well, okay, it makes sense. When it does, we can then pass that plan down to sales and operations planning process. There, it says tactical here, but it's really a translator between the strategic and the tactical, which is the master schedule. So typically we're looking out at months 4 through 18. And we're going to do this on a monthly basis at an aggregate level. We don't want to get into the mix of all our products at this point. We want to group our products, and typically they're called families. But before we can pass those plans down, we have to check on our critical resources. These are the resources whose lead time goes beyond what the master scheduler can see. So we have to think about that at S&OP to make sure that's covered, because by the time the master scheduler sees it, we're already well within the lead time to get that particular resource. So we go back and forth and balance things, and that's what will let us know that we have a realistic and achievable S&OP plan, which we can then pass down to master scheduling. So we pass that down. Now we're getting very tactical. We're typically talking from today, 3 months out, but this was going on a weekly basis. Now there's different levels to plan our master schedule, and you probably have some of products in each of these, and that's where you're going to have to be flexible and make sure that you can plan at different levels in the master schedule. What we do there before we're able to pass that down to MRP, though, we have to do another capacity check. This one is called rough cut capacity planning. These are the bottlenecks within our operations, and sometimes our operation happens to be from a third party, but you would include it here. These are the ones that the master scheduler has time to see them and then rearrange the master schedule to take the best advantage of those particular resources. And then at that point, they'll have a good master schedule that they can pass down to MRP. And I'm not going to get into the bottom two parts there of MRP and then actual execution, but we're going to stay kind of in the middle here. Now, one thing you will notice is that the arrow between each of these processes is double-headed. If SNOP passes down a plan to master scheduling, and master scheduling says, no way, not going to work, that has to go back up to SNOP. You cannot just pass down, here's our wish list, good luck with it, see you next month. So all these arrows go both ways. If we look at our resources when we're doing SNOP and we can't increase that resource in time, we got to go back and change our plan. So this is what I mean by a basic business hierarchy. So the question always becomes, well, why plan? Now, I spent 30 years working in different manufacturing facilities, and we would come out with this really great schedule, and we'd go talk to the operations people, the supervisors and everything, and give them this great schedule on Monday morning. And then on Tuesday morning, we would show up again and say, okay, we got to rearrange what we gave you yesterday. And I don't know about you guys, but I have actually heard at meetings somebody mumbling just loud enough so that we would hear it. Why do you guys even plan? All you do is change it every time something happens. Every time the wind blows, you change it. So why do we even plan in the first place? Well, one of the things we're trying to do is to get our company and all our resources and all the different departments to be aligned so that they can be focused and engaged together on everything we need to do. Think all the way back to, there it is, that triangle. We've got to keep everything here in balance. Now that balance is defined strategically by the leaders of your company. So we need to think about trying to align, focus, and engage all of our people. Now, the key here is, well, we've got to keep our customers satisfied while we're spending the right amount of money on inventory and the right amount of money on capacity. And that's where all of our processes will come into place. By doing a plan, we can understand what our revenue expectations are, what our cash requirements are going to be. When is the cash coming in? We sell it this month, but we may not get the cash for it for another 2 months. So there's a couple different ways to be looking at that. So planning helps us get an idea of where we're going on this. I worked in a company once that did textile arts and crafts materials that went to people who created their own gifts for Christmas. And during April, May, June, we did not have a lot of business going out the door, but we had to keep production going so that we could meet the requirements that came in August and September, which was basically our Christmas season. So we really had to know what kind of revenue are we expecting and where are we going to get the cash to keep things going while we're waiting for the big season. So planning at all different levels is a big part of that. So what basically is sales and operations planning? I'm sure that with 53 people out there, there's probably more than one name for SNOP among you guys. You know, I very often hear PSYOP. I hear IBP. I've even heard DNOP. I was at a company with one of my partners, Dan Marino, and they said, we really need help putting in SNOP. And they said it very quietly. We said, why are you whispering? And they said, well, because the CEO had a bad experience at his last company on SNOP. So if we called it that, he'd kick us out of the office. So they said, let's call it DNOP. The D stood for distribution. Why, I don't know, but it doesn't really matter what you call it. A rose by any other name still sticks you with the thorn. I mean, smells as sweet. So what is SNOP? It's driven by the strategy that's put in place by the leadership of the company, and it's driven by your future unconstrained demand plan. Now, the key word there is unconstrained, because as you're putting together that demand plan for months 4 through 18, in our example, you want to be very careful not to influence that plan because of your constraints. You want to be able to look and give yourself enough time to resolve the constraints that come up. SNOP is generally described as a 5-step process. And the final step, step 5, is when the executive leadership team gets together and blesses the plan or changes it. That's the only time where we might change our demand plan, because at that level, we are doing risk management. We're at that final meeting and we have this unconstrained plan. It says, well, to meet this plan, here's the money we're going to have to spend. And here are some long lead time resources that we got to start taking care of 15 months away, but we got to do it now and make a decision now. Your finance people are going to look right at the people who prepared that unconstrained demand plan and ask, how good are you at predicting that far out into the future? Now, I was always on the supply side, so we were always sitting on the other side of the table giggling about that. And then all of a sudden, the finance person looks at us and said, and just how confident are you that you're going to hit your plan every month? Because if you do, it'll be the first time ever. So at that level, we may, when we talk about risk management, leadership may say, yeah, I hear that you can get that demand. However, we're not willing to take the risk of the investments that it'll take to hit that plan. And at that point, you may change a demand plan, but not during the process. SNOP is market facing. All right, we are not looking at specific customers. Yes, we're going to use some major customers as a barometer, but it's a market facing, because customers you have now may not be there a year from now. There will be customers a year from now that you don't even know exist now. I worked for Hasbro for 10 years, and our products, 80% of our products were brand new every year. So we had to plan products at an aggregate level, and we had to look at the market as a market, not a customer. You know, everybody knows about good old Mr. Potato Head, born 1951, 52, first toy ever advertised on TV. Don't worry, that won't be on the test. But Mr. Potato Head as a family is there, but they're constantly changing the individual products that people see on the shelf. Now, I know, looking at a few of you there, you just might remember the Mr. Potato Head I do when I was a kid. There was a small box of parts. There was no body. There was nothing in there. It was just a bunch of parts. And you had to go to mom and say, can I have a potato? And then you would make a Mr. Potato Head. Sometimes it was an apple. Hey, where I lived, it could have been an eggplant. But you had to then return it for dinner and make sure all the pieces were out before it went in the oven. So Mr. Potato Head as a family is there, and we can predict fairly well what the family's going to do. But at the SNOP level, we won't know the individual products yet. The horizon, I call it medium, because long-term to me starts to talk way strategic into the future. So it begins after your MPS ends. In our example, that's month 4, because the MPS was 3 months. And then it continues for 3 months beyond the longest key resource that we have to plan. And the reason I say that is because we need to see it coming and be able to evaluate it for a few months. Number one, to make sure that that demand is still there. And number two, to give us a chance to have discussions on other options besides just buying a whole new machine. So if our longest lead time resource is 15 months, that's where we get the 18-month horizon for the SNOP horizon. In SNOP, we are going to be including risk management. We finally have the place where we can, at a leadership level, discuss the risks and weigh the risks when we talk about them. SNOP includes every single department you can possibly think of, and it's owned by the CEO. Now, if you're a division of a big company, that may be called a business unit manager, might be called a general manager. There's lots of different titles. The key is, what area is SNOP covering and who's the leader of that area that then has a team of direct reports. And more often than not, I'll call that a leadership team. To try and condense the definition, it's a formal, disciplined monthly process that culminates in a forum for meaningful discussion among all the leaders of the company to create a single company-wide game plan. And so you'll notice it's formal. There will be certain things you have to do at certain times. It's disciplined. Now, discipline doesn't mean you can never change it. What it means is, this is the best way we know how to do it now, but we're going to keep an eye on it and continuously improve that process. Another key point in this definition is that it's monthly. Companies that say we want to do it quarterly are going to end up doing more work than if they had to do it monthly. By doing it monthly, the first question at every single step and every single meeting we have for SNOP, the first question is, what do we know now that we did not know last month? So you only have this 1 month period to go back. And by being disciplined, you're always doing it on the same work day of the month. So if our sales plan or demand plan is due by workday 7, it's always workday 7, and therefore that's that month. So this gives us a chance to put away all the conversation about, well, whose number is right? Oh, I just heard this happen. We can really zero in on what's happened in the last month and then react. Again, at Hasbro, we did SNOP and we did it every month, but there were probably only 3 times in that cycle of 12 months where we had a lot of new information. We had a toy fair in February in New York. It was an international toy fair, and we got lots of information out of there. Actually, we got lots of data, and then we had to figure out how to turn it into information. So there, when we did the next SNOP run, there was a lot of intense work that changed almost every family, versus May and June, when there's not a lot going on. We just had a family here and there that had a few different changes. Sometimes it's because the performance isn't what we expected. Sometimes it's because there's a group of new products in a family that are being delayed, but not every single family was affected for every single month. So just because we're doing 12 cycles doesn't mean every one of those cycles is a big, long, involved, labor-intensive kind of function. So let's move on to the master schedule. The drivers there, the first one is SNOP, because coming out of SNOP, we have that production plan, and it's pretty small up here, but that production plan comes down to master scheduling. When master schedule month 3 is pulled in because a month has just ended, that month, the overall parameters for that month comes from the SNOP process. So that's one of our drivers. We are also now down in the mix level. So we have actual demand on products that we're master scheduling. And we also have some forecast within those 3 months. Most of the time, there's at least, if you're make to order, there might only be a short forecast towards the end of it. If you're make to stock, it's almost all forecast. So you have to deal with that. The other driver is going to be our resources, which in this case are our bottlenecks, those functions within our plant that we have to be very careful to plan every hour we can get out of them to gang up our runs so we don't have a lot of downtime for changeovers. Those are all things that happen in the master scheduling world. But these are not the resources that we did in S&OP, because those had longer lead times, and the S&OP process had already taken care of them. It is customer facing now as opposed to the market, because now we're dealing with customer orders. We're dealing with the short forecast period that we have in place, and we know our customer, and we're face to face with those customers. Our detail level starts to come down into and spread out into more and more detail. Now that level is going to depend on what your customers require, what's their preference, and I'm going to get to that when we go to the next slide. It's a shorter horizon because it's based on the cumulative lead time of the majority of your products plus a small buffer. So if you have products where the cumulative lead time is 9 weeks, then your master schedule is going to go out 11 weeks or so, maybe 12. So that way, again, you see things developing and you've got a better chance to attack them without having to make a decision as soon as something happens. So it gives you that little bit of cushion. So that's a cumulative lead time on a majority. If you may have some products that have a very long lead time, don't make everything just about those. You can take care of those in other ways. The owner here is the master scheduler or master scheduling department, however you're structured, depending on how large your company is. But they have to be very closely in contact and participating with people from sales and operations and finance and engineering. When we put together a master schedule, we have to make sure it's realistic and we're going to be able to execute it. So those are the people that are all going to have a say in this. A quick condensed definition. Again, it's formal and it's disciplined, but now it's weekly as opposed to monthly. And it culminates in a realistic and achievable build plan. This is what we want you to make out in manufacturing. And that's going to drive MRP, which is where you're going to get your purchase orders and work orders from. But first of all, we have to give a realistic and achievable build plan. If you work for a boss that says, well, when you do the master schedule, add an extra 10% because that's the only way we might get 100%, you're already behind the 8 ball, because we put in 110 knowing the best we can get is 100. Who's going to choose what that other 10 is and what they're going to miss? It's going to happen down on the factory floor, where you have people that don't see the big picture because they're not in close contact with customers and engineering and what have you. So we need to really keep it realistic and achievable. So what levels might there be in a master schedule? The easiest way I've seen to explain this is to take a little walk through a supermarket. So if your company has some products that are make to stock, here we are in one of the aisles in the supermarket. And I actually had some person ask the question yesterday, where is that supermarket? Because we can't find anything on the shelves in the paper goods aisle anymore. Well, this is a pre-COVID-19 picture of a supermarket shelf. But this is make to stock. So what that means is our customer has told us, you decide the final product, packaged and everything, because I want 0 lead time. By 0 lead time, I mean pick and ship. So if we're in the supermarket here looking at this aisle, we look at that and say, what level of choice am I asking for here? You know, and to compare with my 0 lead time. Well, it may look like there's a lot of choice there, but we as consumers have zero choice because we've let the companies decide what to put on that shelf. What we get back for that is the fact that I just pick it, put it in my basket, and I'm on my way. So that's your make to stock environment. Then you may have some customers that are in the assemble to order category. So we walk over to the deli in the supermarket, and there's lots of things there, and I'm talking about the stuff in the case, not all the prepackaged things. And we look at that and say, cool, I need some provolone this week. Actually, I need provolone every week. But there's a hunk of provolone there, and I'm going to pick, there might be a few different kinds, and I'm going to say, I want Stella Sharp provolone. And I want 1.5 pounds this week. I want it sliced medium, and I want you to put a piece of wax paper in between each slice to make it easier for me to peel off one piece at a time. So then our level of choice just went up a little bit. We get to choose how to finally assemble this thing, assemble to order. But now our lead time went up because now we have to wait for the person behind the counter. And what are they doing? They're going back into manufacturing. They're pulling a sub-assembly out of stock, that big hunk of Stella provolone, and they're bringing it to a machine. And in that machine, they're going to cut it. And then they're going to put the wax paper in there. And then they're going to package it. And then they're going to weigh it and price it and hand it to me. So I let them go back part of the way into their manufacturing, but I don't want them to go all the way back because then that'll take too long. So I'm willing to give up a little bit of lead time by having a little bit of choice. So we would master schedule those items at the sub-assembly level. Now, you also have some customers that say, I want it my way. You as a company, I expect you as my supplier to have the raw materials in stock already. But then I want to come in, sit with you, and design my own product. So here I have you in the supermarket, we're in the bakery. And this isn't just pulling a sheet cake already made and saying, hey, could you please write on it, happy birthday, Wanda June, which is a movie that many of you may have seen a long, long time ago. I want you to make me a cake from scratch. You tell me what ingredients I can choose from, and then I'm going to tell you how to put it together. And I want a cake that's half chocolate, half strawberry, and half vanilla. So I can't see you all, but I'm guessing there's a couple engineers in there trying to figure out how to get 3 halves into one whole. But I want it that way. I then want you to put on this kind of icing, and then I want you to write on it, happy birthday. And then I have the product I want. So now I have gotten a lot more choice, but my lead time just went up to the point where I can't sit and wait for it. I have to come back. Whether that's 2 weeks or 4 weeks or 2 days or 4 hours, it's not something that I'm going to stand around like I did at the deli. So that's the area where we have a make to order. Now, one side note on terminology. Very often I walk into a company and they say, our products are make to order. I said, oh, okay, so you just schedule the raw materials. And they say, oh, no, we have a catalog and our customer chooses from the catalog and then we make their order. But they can't tell us to change anything. They can't tell us to add anything. We just don't process the order until we have a sales order. Well, in our world, the terminology there is you're actually doing make to stock because you did not give your customer any choice. The difference is that you chose not to stock any on some of those products, and you're actually giving them a lead time when it's still no level of choice for them involved. So you have to be a little bit careful with the terminology. Now, in addition to that, and this may be hard to find in many supermarkets, but when I was growing up in Jersey, my mother used to take me to the butcher and she'd go have this long conversation with him. Most of the words I couldn't understand because she wouldn't let me learn Italian, but she'd go to the butcher and say, hey, the family's all coming over in June. You know, it's St. Anthony's feast day on June 13th. We got a whole bunch of people coming over, and we want a very specific species of goat that lives in Mattaleone right outside of Naples. And the butcher would say, no problem. All right, now we don't carry that. So it's not in my raw material. So it's not a make to order environment, but I will go get that for you. And your lead time is going to be 8 weeks, whatever. So at this level, when I get to engineer to order, I now have unlimited choices because the company is not keeping even raw material, but I also have to wait a long time to get it. And I know some of you guys are in Jersey or near Jersey, and you know that if you go to some of the Italian delis and butcher places, you can get any kind of meat. Doesn't matter if it's an endangered species or not. It just might take a little longer and cost a little bit more for you. But that would be an engineer to order kind of environment. So these environments are dictated by our customers. Do they want us to make the decision? Do they want to have a little say? Do they want to have a lot of say? So what that looks like in your master scheduling world, if it's make to stock, we are going to master schedule at the finished good level because we've told our customers we're going to have this ready for you. So all the lead time is pick and ship. So that's make to stock. Those assembled to orders from the deli, we're going to buy the raw materials and we're going to put them in process, but we're going to stop at a certain point that's very common that we can then make into many different products based on a particular customer order. So at that level, we're going to master schedule our sub-assemblies. In a make-to-order environment, where our customer wants a lot more choice, but doesn't want the full lead time of an engineered product, we're going to say, we'll master schedule to make sure we have the raw materials that are most common, and then wait for the customer to help us design the product. So we have those few raw materials that turn into lots and lots and lots of different products versus a make to stock where you have a whole bunch of different materials that turn into a few products because you've defined what those products are. Are there any questions up to this point? Anybody?
So the one that always comes up with, to me, is this is a great process, but what happens when you have a product that has a relatively long lead time, a not necessarily great forecast, and a requirement of a delivery within that lead time?
If it's a product, if it's a few products, you will handle them as exceptions. And you'll do all kinds of things on doing material requisitions, ordering ahead, even though you don't have a requirement, lots of different ways. If that's many products, then you have to make decisions on, well, what raw materials are we going to cover? How much choice are we going to give our customers? And then take it from there. So if your customer is going to have a choice in the design, is it going to be something that we schedule at the sub-assembly level? Because that's going to be the same for many customers, and then we finish it. Or is it the kind that they don't even want us to start until they tell us how to finish it? Very often I hear of companies that say we are engineer to order, or we're even make to order. When you go in and start to really look at how they do things, many orders can come out of the same sub-assembly, and it's a matter of risk. How far up do we want to process before we have a customer order? So
that's what I'm getting to.
Okay.
Is within the master scheduling / SNOP, where are you putting the discussion of the risk of the materials on a make to stock, assembled to order type product where you have a lead time constraint?
When you're talking individual products, you're talking about a master schedule. If you're talking about a family or group of products without talking about specific products, then you're talking about discussions at the SNOP level.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good question.
Anthony, this is Hari Iyer. I had a similar kind of question to what Keith was asking. I represent the aerospace and defense industry, and I was just referencing the slide wherein you were talking about the hierarchy, right? So the cumulative lead time example that you talked about was 9 weeks, and I completely agree with the assessments. What are the recommendations or guidance based on your experience for the industry that I represent, wherein the cumulative lead time is approximately 52 weeks?
I've done a whole bunch of work for Collins Aerospace, that's now Raytheon, and I've done it for GE, the air side, and yep, that they say the exact same thing. It's 52 weeks. My suggestions to them always is, we've got to find out what's making it 52 weeks and what kind of things we can do with our suppliers to shorten that. Because at least the experience I've had is it's not been their own manufacturing process, it's been the cumulative lead time increased because of the raw material that they buy. So that's when you start hammering away at that. And that's on a product level, that's a master scheduling kind of decision. You want to try and condense that down, unless you can get your customers to accept the fact that your lead time is 52 weeks and they can't violate it, which usually I've heard, and it was usually the government, and they would not allow that kind of thing.
Yep.
Does that answer you?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. And by the way, great flow. Really appreciate it.
Very good. You're welcome. So here we have our identical twins, Amanda and Megan. These are the similarities between SNOP and master scheduling. We're interested in customer satisfaction on both of them. Yeah, I know I said market in SNOP, but that leads to the customer satisfaction. They both are trying to do revenue expectations for different horizons, but they're both doing that. We're looking at our cash flow and our investments. So think all the way back to our triangle, and those are the things they all, SNOP and master scheduling, have the same objectives. Where they're different are in places like the few we have here. In SNOP, the driver is the strategy that's been set forth by the leadership team. So here we have fraternal twins. She's named Denise and he's named the nephew, because they let the brother-in-law decide on the names. And the drivers of SNOP are going to be the strategy from the leadership team. In master scheduling, it's all the policies that you build around the master scheduler. Hey, you've got to keep this level of production. You can only increase it or decrease it by 5% from 1 week to the next. You can only have this much overtime, the budget, all those kind of down lower detailed policies. Our focus in SNOP, as we've discussed, is the market, while in MPS, it's the customer itself. Our detail in SNOP, because of our horizon being longer, is at the aggregate or family level, while the master schedule is now the individual. That's where we have the mix. SNOP has volume, master scheduling has mix. And therefore, the horizon for MPS is short compared to SNOP. The resources that we talk about in SNOP are the long lead time resources, and they could be machines, a very specific kind of labor, could be space on the floor, space in the parking lot, all kinds of things. Those resources are the ones that take longer to get than our master scheduler horizon goes into the future. In MPS, we're now just worried about the bottlenecks within that MPS horizon so that as a master scheduler, we can balance the work in a way that makes the best use of those bottlenecks. S&OP, the leadership of the company is involved. Like I said, that may just be a small division or it may be an entire company. It depends at what level you're going to do these things. In the master schedule, we've got the line of management where you've got the plant manager, the master scheduler, the sales manager, the finance guy, purchasing, that level down below that are making the things happen on the execution level. S&OP is done monthly, MPS is done weekly. And then the owner is the CEO. Like I said, that title may vary, but it's the leader of your area. While in the MPS, the decisions are made by the master scheduler, who has to be really in tune with all those other departments, but they're the ones that actually own the master schedule that's going to come out each week and produce that anticipated build schedule. So that, my friends, is a very short and sweet overview trying to give you a little bit of knowledge about S&OP and MPS and how they're the same and how they're different and how to recognize what to talk about when you're doing each different process. So, questions, talk to me.
So Anthony, this is Hari again. I got a quick question regarding this hierarchy chart, which is very interesting, by the way. Like the reality is, while the master scheduler and the S&OP team have put the strategies together, nobody can predict the constraints that can strike you, and it unfortunately strikes you when you least expect it, which forces the decision of either you do recovery scheduling or let the delinquency build up. What is the industry standard to balance the delinquency versus recovery scheduling, at the same time ensuring schedule stability through the supply chain nodes?
Okay, and that's where in S&OP, that's where the leadership team is developing that strategy. Remember, we said one of the drivers of S&OP is what's the company's strategy. So up at that strategic level, without talking about individual products or customers, the leadership team is saying, this is how we want to run our company based on what our customers need from us. When you get down into the master scheduling world, that's when you get into the detail, and that's where you start doing measurements like on time in full. You don't do an on time in full measurement at S&OP level. It will help you improve that, but the real place for that is down in master scheduling. And again, your company's got to have some policies. I worked at one company, and at our master scheduling level for our in stock, because we were a make to stock kind of company, we had 3 different levels. Walmart happened to be our biggest customer. I mean, they were like 60 to 70% of our business. For Walmart, we had to have 98% in stock for them. And we measured just for Walmart. The next level down, there were 4 key customers. Joann's, Hobby Lobby, a couple more that now I can't remember because it was so long ago. For them, the answer was 95% in stock. And then everybody else, the answer was 90%. And when you balance all those out together against volume and the weighted average, it came out in the mid to high 90s. But we treated different customers at different levels. So when I think about delinquencies or in stock, the master schedule is going to tell you down at the customer level what you can put up with. And S&OP is going to tell you at the family level, at the general level. One of the things that we did in master scheduling a lot was we used to come up with those strategies. We used to, in our annual meetings back up here in business planning, we used to do an analysis of our customers And we used to actually fire customers every year, because we'd sit at a meeting, we'd have all the different functions involved, and we each came to the meeting with our list. Hey, if I had my way, I'd get rid of these 5 customers. And operations would have this list that says they're horrible. We start the order, they change it, da 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 da. But then the salesperson's raising their hand saying, no, 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 that's one of my best customers. You get rid of them and 5 more leave. Or finance brings up a customer that says, hey, they don't make enough money for us. Why are we spending all this time? And then you have operations saying, yeah, but they're easy to handle. They're easy to deal with. So again, where do you make those decisions? So I guess, long story short, although I've already given you a long story, is at the different levels, you make those different decisions based on the amount of detail that you're dealing with. Did that even come close to answering your question?
Close enough.
Okay.
Anthony,
Yes.
hi, this is Olivia Akin. Just to add on to it, what might help too, because I'm actually, I do the master scheduling. That's like part of my full-time job, that and data analytics for Lockheed Martin. One thing too that we do, that you kind of touched upon, is we, with our contracts, right, built into the contracts says we could be X amount of days late on the left end, and we could be X amount of days early on the right hand. So we get it a lot of whether it's a country, a government, whatever it might be, coming to us and saying, oh, we want to change this, or we want to move this or that, right? And we have, as master schedulers, we see on our end finance or salespeople just changing it. And it's like, you can't just change it. So those built in allows us to say, okay, well, you want to change this, we could kind of still get it to you on time. So that's a big thing with master scheduling too, is making sure that you are still delivering it on time to the customer within their leeway, but you buffer in some time.
Right. So that's a perfect example of what I mean by MPS is being driven by policy. That policy can very easily be a contract that says, hey, for this customer or for this contract, and it may even vary order by order, these are the rules we have to live by. And these are the things the customer said they would live by. So when the master scheduler is actually the policing authority that you have that says, hey, wait a minute, the contract says this, and now you want to do that. And then they raise it up to whatever level they need to. One of the other points that came up last night that I should mention is that if something's happening in master scheduling that's disrupting the whole place, that has to be brought to the attention of the SNOP process. And the master scheduler is usually part of the SNOP process. The hard part there is separating the mix from the volume and the day-to-day from the longer term. But we always have to listen to what's really happening before we make decisions at the SNOP level. That's a good example.
It looks like Zakia and maybe Kerry had a question. I don't know if it got answered through the conversations at the end, but I did notice on the chat. And I'll let you guys jump in. It says,
This is Zakia. Yes, my question got answered.
okay, good.
Thank you.
And Kerry, did you have one? Kerry
I
Coffin.
was replying on that. What was the question was, what is inter and RM? So I said,
Okay, good.
Intermediate and raw material.
Okay, super. Any other questions for our esteemed speaker, Anthony Zampello? We love the graphics, by the way, Tony Z. You're awesome.
They're very simple and basic.
Yeah, that is great. Awesome.
So Ken is going to make this presentation available to you guys, whether it's just the PowerPoint or recorded or whatever, however you're technology works. What you'll see at the bottom is my email address, and you can always find me on LinkedIn. As far as I know, there's only 2 Zampellos out there that have the first name of Anthony, and mine goes under Anthony, and my cousin is Tony.
Awesome. By the way, Jared said his microphone's not working. He has a question. What do you do about MPS delinquency, particularly in a MTO environment?
Well,
Sorry.
in make to order, where we are here now, if you're talking about a true APICS definition of make to order, as a company, we master schedule just the raw material, and then we wait for the customer, and with them, we design what to turn that raw material into. So as far as delinquencies and everything, that's going to be an order by order basis, or like Olivia says, a contract by contract basis, to be able to decide, well, what are we allowed, you know? And what I've seen in many top customers, you have good old, you can deliver 0 days late and up to 3 days early. So that's what we live with. That defines our delinquency ramifications. So is that what is being referred to?
His microphone's not working, so let's assume
Okay.
yes.
Because very often people say make to order and they really mean assemble to order. So in that case, we're building it up to a certain point. So the difference between assemble to order and make to order is, number one, it's the lead time. If your customers will accept a longer lead time because they want to have more of a voice in the way the product is made, that's going to be make to order. But if the customer says, yeah, well, you build it up this far and then I'll tell you how to finish it because I don't want to have that whole lead time, then that becomes the assemble to order.
Awesome. Boy, you've been great.
Hi, this is,
Go ahead.
can I ask a question, Anthony?
Of course.
Okay, this is Casey Horgan. So I actually do master scheduling with Hari and Jared's group. I think where Jared was going with his question was, once you experience MPS delinquency or delinquency to your build plan, and let's say it starts to grow because you have constraints that you cannot overcome, what do you do with that delinquency? Do you move the delinquency, or do you create a whole or a level loaded plan in the future that's reduced in order to get back on track?
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's where he's going with it, but that's kind of one of the things that we have questions about.
So that's in the master scheduling world, and it may creep into SNOP if you can't resolve them within the horizon of the master scheduler. So first of all, in your system, the ship date or the anticipated ship date on the order needs to change so that it's always realistic. So when we first get an order in, the customer says, I want it on February 15th. And you may negotiate and go back with them and say, well, how about February 22nd? If they agree, February 22nd becomes your promise date. And that's the one you're going to measure your performance against. But as you're working on that order, if you start to realize that February 22nd is going to turn into March 22nd, in your system, you have to change that anticipated ship date to March 22nd so that it flows through MRP and everything else, and you don't have all these mismatched parts in there that you then can't execute on. The measurement is still going to come back to that original February 22nd. So system-wise, you should never have overdue customer orders or purchase orders or work orders to the newest date, the current date. You will have past due orders to the original promises that you made. That's for measurement purposes. Is that where you're going with that, you think?
Yeah, so you wouldn't take your delinquent build plan and move it out, basically saying, hey, customer, sorry we missed. we're going to go and reschedule this order we were working on to a date in the future where we feel we can adequately meet your requirements.
Well, the master schedule, by doing it weekly, what you're saying is I have orders that I didn't get done that I was supposed to, and I have new work in here. If together they add up to more than we can do, that's where the real hard part of the master scheduler's job is. They have to figure out, well, where can we do each one based on the policy rules I've been given? Hey, for this customer, I have to give them top priority. This customer is a C-level customer that I'll push them out before I push out my A customers. So the master scheduler, that's what I mean by they have to give an a realistic and achievable build plan that says I'm only given the right amount of work to the factory. And we've agreed on how much overtime, and if there's purchase parts in the way, we've rearranged it that way. But you should never have all these past due orders, because then you can't plan capacity, because there is no capacity in the past. So you want to keep that master schedule realistic and achievable. And that's where you're having meetings with the salespeople and the finance people and the operations people all together, because what's good for sales may not be good financially, and vice versa. So a lot of those meetings, nobody is going to walk out happy, which means you've come up with a compromise.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think one of
thank you.
the issues that we run into, this is Keith again. One of the issues that we run into is, as Hari was mentioning, is with the long lead times. When you start to fall behind and you start rescheduling forward, you're talking about a massive work effort, because you're talking about rescheduling a master schedule out a year.
I won't name the customer I was out, but they were in aerospace and they made engines for airplanes, and that was the mess they were in. And the direction that they got from above, which I do not agree with at all, was to sales, hey, just keep taking orders. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about the fact as to whether we can make it or not. I want orders. Just keep taking orders. So that's like in 2019, you buy a ticket for an airplane and then you go find out that it's overbooked. How do you decide who doesn't get to go on the plane because there aren't enough seats? So that's a leadership thing, and knowing your customers and knowing your market. And I'm not saying it's easy. It ain't easy.
That was great. Any more questions, folks? Get them while you can. Well, Tony's here. I was going to also say I put the survey link in the chat, so you have to copy it now, because once we close the meeting, the chat closes with it. So copy the link to the survey. Doesn't matter where you registered, it all goes into one central database, and then I'll get the data out to the appropriates. So there you go. So please copy that link. It's in the chat section. If you're looking for the chat section at the bottom of the black bar of the